Yeah, so that's 5 stars. The Wright brothers. It's a really good book, though it's written by an historian and not an engineer or a true inventor. So there are a lot of facts here, but a lot of the interesting things aren't fleshed out in my opinion. So there are a few things, many things that I've underlined that I think are extremely important for engineers, inventors, people who want to change the world need to know about how you actually get things done, right? So think of this as an engineering appendix, an invention appendix to a historical book. What I found important, I actually blogged about this on LinkedIn, and I kind of took the stuff I really liked and I hashtagged it and said, how do you invent the airplane? And I just pulled out the things that I thought really separated the Wright brothers from other people on like how they were actually able to achieve it. Oh, the first page of the book. If I were giving a young man advice as to how he might succeed in life, I would say to him, pick out a good father and mother and begin life in Ohio. I was a Michigan guy. Thought that was funny. I actually like the state of Ohio. That was Wilbur Wright. Yeah, I mean, you do need a good father and mother, and as you'll see, you just need a good support structure and people who allow you to obsess over things and focus on them and don't call you crazy when other people might. All right. This one warranted 3 stars. It's a quote by this guy named Ingersoll. So it says, included among the ecclesiastical works on his bedroom shelves were the writings of the great agnostic Robert Ingersoll, whom the brothers, the Wright brothers and Catherine, were encouraged to read. Quote, every mind should be true to itself, should think, investigate, and conclude for itself. Now that, oh my God, like, yes, obviously, every mind should be true to itself, should think, investigate, and conclude for itself. Nobody does this. Nobody thinks for themselves. They let other people think for them. They're wired to do it. There's a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, where he basically talks about how humans are, mammals, they're animals, and they're hardwired to take shortcuts because it's too hard to evaluate things sometimes. So they use keys, indicators, stimuli in the environment to take shortcuts because they don't want to think for themselves. The problem is, there's some really smart people out there who work at Facebook, they work at Google, they're out there and they're like, well, how do we tap into those wirings, how humans are wired, so that we can trick them, manipulate them, feed off of that so they buy more stuff and we make money, right? So it always just ticks me off that there's so many smart people out there whose job it is just to make ads more pervasive and effective, as if buying things, improves the world in any fundamental way. I really like that quote, that every mind should be true to itself, should think and investigate and conclude for itself, because nobody does that. I mean, very few people do that. I try to do that, my wife tries to do that, we really try and do that because that's the way to live, but no one else seems to want to do that. Here, this one warranted 5 stars. Years later, a friend told Orville that he and his brother would always stand as an example of how far Americans with no special advantages could advance in the world. Quote, but it isn't true, Orville responded emphatically, to say that we had no special advantages. The greatest thing in our favor was growing up in a family where there was always much encouragement to intellectual curiosity. Yeah, so that's 5 stars, and that is a special marking in the page, because I have 2 young boys, and I'm always thinking about the best way to raise them, and things like this stand out to me, where growing up in a family where there was always much encouragement to intellectual curiosity. Yeah, I mean, how many people get this, right? Hopefully you get it from me. Dear watcher, the person watching this, you need to be curious. You need to think for yourself. You need to learn how to learn, and you need to learn how to evaluate things, and you need to learn how to filter. Everybody should know that. It's a special privilege now in the same way it was when the Wright brothers were born and they were doing this work. That is a special advantage, to have, a family where you're always encouraged to do things, even if they seem impossible or crazy, and other people think you're crazy. But, that's why I got 5 stars. It's very good. All right, this one got 3 stars and also a mark in the book. Now and then the brothers would include items from other publications that they judged worthy of the reader's attention, such as one titled, Encourage Your Boy. It was reprinted from Architect and Building News. So this is an excerpt. Do not wait for the boy to grow up before you begin to treat him as an equal. A proper amount of confidence and words of encouragement and advice give him to understand that you trust him in many ways, helps to make a man of him long before he is a man in either stature or years. If a boy finds he can make a few articles with his hands, it tends to make him rely on himself, and the planning that is necessary for the execution of the work is a discipline and an education of great value to him. Yeah, right? Like, I didn't know how this was going to start. It may as well be about raising kids, right? Like, I'm big on connections. And this is a book about the Wright brothers. And it's about, it's an historical novel. But in the first chapter, there are all sorts of important nuggets about how to raise kids, I think. And encourage your boy or girl, 2023. You don't wait for the boy to grow up before you treat him as an equal. All kids are equals. Like, this is something I struggled with as a kid. Some teachers hated me, some teachers loved me, but the teachers that hated me because they were often belittling and like disrespectful because they were just a teacher and I was a kid, and I always felt the opinion then, as I do now, everybody deserves to be treated as an equal, no matter who they are, and treated like a human and someone capable of thinking for themselves and having a conversation. And if a teacher ever kind of treated me like not as an equal, well, we had problems because I thought that was a ridiculous standard to set. And I have 2 boys, and I'm always looking for hacks to raise them well. And this is a great example. Do not wait for the boy to grow up before you begin to treat him as an equal. My 2-year-old son can handle a lot, and he asks questions, and I give him the best answers I can, and I tell him when I don't know things, and I try to explain things. I trust him to do things. I do treat him as an equal, and I don't think this crushes him. If he can't do something I ask him to do, that's okay, and I make sure that he knows it's okay and that I love him. But I don't worry about the damaging effects of potty training or putting too much on his plate or having a dog or talking to dogs. As long as I'm not overbearing, this will help him grow. And if anything, a lot of kids, their growth is stunted because they're made to feel like they can't handle responsibility, when of course they can. If you look back historically, you read enough biographies, Alexander Hamilton, he's a good example. People are asked to do so much, and they're asked to do a fraction of that today, and I don't know that has made them better off. But I do believe that the Wright brothers were correct, that it's never too early to start encouraging your boys or girls. 3 stars from me. This is funny. This isn't really star-worthy, but just, patterns, connections through life, things that never go away. So this is a quote. The Wright brothers made bicycles. They were famous for that. They had a bicycle situation. Voices were raised in protest. Bicycles were proclaimed morally hazardous. Until now, children and youth were unable to stray very far from home on foot. Now, one magazine warned 15 minutes could put them miles away. Because of bicycles, it was said young people were not spending the time they should with books, and more seriously, that suburban and country tours on bicycles were not infrequently accompanied by seductions. Has that changed? It's the same thing with cars, same thing with phones. It's the same situation where, something new creates an issue and people are worried about the moral hazards. And you always laugh and you're like, oh, bicycles, that's so innocent. What about cars? What about TikTok? What about Facebook? So that's why I underlined it. Here you go. I circled this one with 1 star. In another letter, this to brother Lauren, Wilbur had still more to say. He was one who not only devoted much of his time to reading, but to thinking, and he had given a great deal of thought to the subject of business and reached a number of his own conclusions. So obviously that's not a direct quote, McCullough wrote that. He's just emphasizing that he had devoted a lot of time to reading, and he had given a great deal of thought to the subject of business, and he reached his own conclusions, right? What were some of those conclusions? In business, it is the aggressive man who continually has his eye on his own interests who succeeds. Business is merely a form of warfare in which each combatant strives to get the business away from his competitors and at the same time keep them from getting what he already has. No man has ever been successful in business who is not aggressive, self-assertive, and even a little bit selfish perhaps. There is nothing reprehensible in an aggressive disposition so long as it is not carried to excess. For such men make the world and its affairs move. There's more, but coming to your own conclusions, that's self-awareness. Right? How many people are that self-aware that they can come to that? And they're like, no man has ever been successful in business who is not aggressive, self-assertive, and even a little bit selfish, perhaps. Those sound bad, but he's thought, there's nothing reprehensible in an aggressive disposition, as long as it's done in moderation. For such men make the world and its affairs move. It's true, whether, you want to believe it or not, the world moves because of, people like Elon Musk, who are aggressive, who lay off a bunch of people at Twitter, who are very outspoken about what they want and drive things forward, but the world is better. Twitter's a better place. I'm on Twitter, it's better. It just is. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. All right, that's the first chapter. So yeah, those are just some thoughts I had. I don't know. Kelsey set this up. If you're watching this, honey, I am done, and I'm going to try and stop this. It's embarrassing.